Women sometimes, well, oftentimes, they fall to the back, right? And their voice is silenced. They experience things and they're afraid to speak out and speak up.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Kate Bryan. I am so excited to be back here for another inspiring story with you this week. We are a few weeks into our Incarceration and Women series of the One Girl Revolution podcast, and we have a few more weeks to go. I encourage you to listen to all of the episodes that we have up thus far and to keep listening as we have some really powerful stories coming at you over the next couple of weeks. Women are the fastest growing population within jail and prison, and the reasons for that are so multifaceted, but we don't talk about it enough. Since One Girl Revolution is all about highlighting women and their stories, I thought that we could help shine a light on some of the issues facing incarcerated women, formerly incarcerated women, and women in the world today. We need to be talking about all of this, spreading awareness and helping those that we can. It all starts with us. We can all do something. And you will get some great ideas from today's guest, and you will be blown away by her story. But before we get into this week's episode, please subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. Subscribe to us on YouTube at One Girl Revolution, and check out our website, onegirlrevolution.com, for more podcast episodes, videos, and so much more. Also, we have big news here at One Girl Revolution. We just found out a couple of days ago that our short documentary, The Girl Inside, which you can watch on our website or on our YouTube channel if you haven't seen it already, is nominated for an Emmy Award. Absolutely insane. I can't believe it. And I'm so grateful for all that each and every one of you have done to support this platform, this podcast, and our continued work through the documentaries and everything else that we have going on. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Please watch The Girl Inside and share it with everyone you know. Okay, now on to this week's episode. This week's episode is incredible. And what's really interesting is this guest was right down the road from me in Detroit. Some of the best stories are the ones in our own communities and in our own neighborhoods. So keep your eyes out for the One Girl Revolution stories in your own community. On this week's episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, I am so excited to welcome Sherelle Hogan, founder of the Pure Heart Foundation. Sherelle has a tragic, beautiful, and powerful life story to share. Both of her parents were incarcerated when she was young. She was abused while they were incarcerated, and shortly after her father got out, he died when she was just 10 years old. Needless to say, the first years of Sherelle's life were filled with a great deal of heartache, pain, and suffering. But as she tells in this episode, she had a powerful interaction with a mentor when she was just 14 years old who encouraged her to find light in the darkness. And Sherelle did just that. Sherelle worked hard and graduated high school and college with honors. She went on to work in corporate America, but left her job in 2015 to start the Pure Heart Foundation, an organization that supports children with incarcerated parents. This organization has a beautiful house filled with joy, fun, and support that kids can come by after school to get haircuts, play video games, get mani-pedis, garden, whatever their little heart desires. They can get help with their homework, build friendships, and get support from mentors, and so much more. You will hear so much more about it in this episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast with Sherelle. The Pure Heart Foundation is not only supporting these kids, but they're also helping break the cycle of incarceration. 100% of the kids who have gone through their programming and have been connected to the foundation have not gone on to be incarcerated. And they're working to build relationships between the parents and their kids. This episode, this woman, these stories, they will move you, they will open your heart and your mind, and they will challenge you and make you want to do something. Please listen to and share Sherelle's amazing story. Without further ado, here's Sherelle. Sherelle, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to be sitting here in your house, in your home, the Pure Heart home. And I can't wait to talk all about the great work that you're doing and all your programs and your own story. But before we get into all of that, I want to ask you, who is a One Girl Revolution in your own life? Who's a woman or girl that's touched your life?
I thought about this question and I'm like, it's so many women and girls that I know now that I haven't met that has inspired me. But if I had to choose one person for this case, I would say my mother. And I would say her because she has experienced so much. And no matter what she's gone through, nothing has ever changed her heart. She has kept a heart of gold. She's a giver. She tries her best to make sure that the people around her feel loved, feel seen. She'll give her last dollar to someone if she know they need it. And I admire that about my mother. I think that's where I get my heart from too. And she has inspired me to do the work that I'm doing now. Literally, if it wasn't for her story, we wouldn't be sitting here. So she's my biggest inspiration today.
That's beautiful. So I want to talk about your mom, and I want to talk about your own life story because you have a really inspiring story. So I'd love to rewind and talk about who you are, where you're from, and just a little bit about your story.
Absolutely. I am a girl from the east side of Detroit who has lived all around Michigan, just from having that housing instability because of my parents being incarcerated. But outside of my parents' incarceration, I am a survivor, a woman of great faith. If it wasn't for God, I wouldn't be here. He has literally saved me, preserved my life and my mind to be able to thrive. But as a little girl, my mom went to prison when I was 6, and my father went to prison when I was 7. And 2 months after their incarceration, I began to be molested. And from there, I began to experience a lot of abuse. And my father was released when I was 10. Then 2 months later, he passed away. And it was just a lot of uncertainty in my life as a little girl. I remember feeling not wanted. At one point, I didn't even want to live because I didn't understand the purpose behind so much pain that I was experiencing as a child. I remember crying many days because no one around me was experiencing the things that I was experiencing. You know, I was watching kids, you know, play basketball, play volleyball, run track with both of their parents, you know, in the stands cheering them on and having that support. And I never had that. And I was ashamed and embarrassed because my aunt was picking me up, and it was my great aunt. So she was much older. So she really wasn't as cool, right? So everyone is like, who's this old lady picking you up from school all the time? Where's your parents? And I remember making up a lie, you know, like my mom's away for work. She has a really important job. That's why she's not around, because I was not comfortable to talk about where my mom really was, and I was in prison. But I don't know if I'm getting ahead of
that's great.
The conversation.
I think it's important. I think it's so important to share that because there's so many kids that feel isolated. And, you know, even in the age of social media, we look at other people and we're like, why can't I have that? Or, and I'm sure that that's what you were experiencing too.
Yeah.
It's like, you're going through so much trauma and pain and suffering and feeling isolated and feeling alone. But the reality is there's so many other kids and so many other people who feel that. And you know that through your work, you know, you see it.
Absolutely.
But it must have been so difficult going through all that.
It was. But fast forward, after all of that turmoil, I met a mentor when I was about 14. And she encouraged me to find the light in darkness. And from there, I found that light, and I started seeing that light inside of me. Then I went to school and, you know, graduated with honors in high school, and then graduated from U of M with honors, and found myself in corporate America, living the dream. But it really wasn't the dream because I was miserable. Like, I did not go through all of that to end up here. You know, I began to ask God, what's my purpose? What do you want me to do? I need you to make sense of all the things that I experienced. And I know me working here behind a desk, redoing the same thing, the same routine cannot be why I'm existing. And he literally told me, quit your job. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds fun. But really, what do you really want me to do, right? And how am I going to pay my bills and live, right? But a girl like me had faith, and I believe that if I can experience all of that and be okay, if God told me to quit my job, I would be okay. And I quit my job, and I started Pure Heart.
It's amazing. You have on your website this line that I want to read, a powerful headline, which I will put your website and Pure Heart website, all the different websites and social media and everything in the show notes. But I want to ask you about it. You said at the top of your website, I was a statistic, but I didn't become one. Why do you think that is? I think it's really important. And I wanted to ask you that question. Do you think it's because of the mentor? Do you think it's probably a lot of different things, but I wanted to ask you, what do you think that is?
Yeah. Like you said, it's a lot of different answers to the question, but I believe that it was because I wanted more. It was because as a little girl, I remember knowing that life would not always be hard. And I knew that it was going to be up to me to change that. Not the people around me, not the circumstances around me, because obviously I wasn't in the best circumstances, but I knew if I fought for myself, I wouldn't let myself down. I wouldn't be the person that society thought that I was going to become. I wanted more. And most importantly, I knew one day I was going to become a mother, and nothing would, like, I could not imagine my child going through anything. Like, I can imagine when I'm a mom, my child will just be in their shell, in their bubble, right? Because I'm going to make sure that cycle does not continue. And I knew if I didn't change the trajectory of my life, the possibility of my child or young person that, I would take care of, it could be their story. And I just didn't want that to happen. I just wanted more.
Yeah.
I think
there are obviously things in our lives that we can't control, but I think it's powerful for us to think about that we do also have the power to change the cycle and the trajectory of not only our own lives. And I think that's one thing that's really powerful. And we talk about it a lot on this podcast because we're talking to women and girls, but the power that mothers have, the power that women have to really change the world and change the trajectory of not only their own lives, but their children, their grandchildren, and generations to come.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about Pure Heart now. Your heart project that I love heart projects. So how did Pure Heart spark? Was it when you were leaving the job and you were like, I got to figure out something, I want to start something, but I want to know about that moment, that spark moment when the Pure Heart Foundation sparked.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, everything is literally stemming from me being a little girl. The irony of that, right? But so when I was in corporate America, I always knew I wanted to help children just because I had experienced so much. And when I quit initially, it wasn't, Pure Heart's mission wasn't children of incarcerated parents. It was just to start a foundation that helped young people in underserved communities thrive. And I wanted to provide tutoring and mentorship and etc. And I remember sitting down with a funder and he said, Sherelle, Pure Heart sounds great, but Pure Heart sounds like the other thousands of nonprofits that exist. What makes you different? What makes your foundation stand out? It's 1 million tutoring programs in the city of Detroit. Why should I fund you? Who are you? Tell me what your story is. And I'm like, well, my parents were in prison. I went through this. I went through that, this and that. Oh, I forgot I went through this. And he's like, wait, what did you say? And I was like, my parents were in prison. And he was like, oh, talk about that. Talk about how you felt when your parents were in prison. And from that conversation, he wrote me a check for $10,000. He said, I will fund that. Wow. Because now you're providing a service and resource to young people and to this community that does not exist. And literally from that moment, I changed the mission. I literally revamped everything about Pure Heart. And that's when our mission became to end the cycle of generational incarceration from that conversation.
It's the power of our stories too. And I think it's important for us to all think about that, like that sometimes we go through, and it's not to sugarcoat the terrible things that we all have gone through or are going through right now. People that are listening, if they've gone through something really difficult or they're going through it, but the power that we can have to impact others.
Yeah, absolutely.
In their lives. And that's what you're doing through the Pure Heart Foundation. So what do you guys do now? Tell me, I know there's a lot of different elements, a lot of different facets to the work that you do, but talk to me about the Pure Heart Foundation.
Yes. So our mission is to embrace children experiencing parental incarceration, but our ultimate goal is to embrace them and empower them to break the cycle of generational involvement in the criminal justice system. From experiencing parental incarceration, I was very strategic on building out a program that I thought that would literally give them the blueprint in order to break that cycle. And it involves 6 pillars. One is mental health awareness. You can't expect a child to succeed and live day to day without making sure that their mental capacity is stable. Like, I remember being a girl in class and I could barely comprehend what my teacher was saying because I was trying to figure out why my mother was in prison, right? So mental health is one of the biggest things that I want to provide through Pure Heart for our scholars. Secondly is academic enrichment, right? In order to beat a system that was designed to break you and to keep you in a vicious cycle is to be educated about it and to know what you're up against. So making sure that they have the educational resources that they need to thrive is critical. Another pillar is family reunification, making sure that they communicate with their parent, that they see their parent, that their relationship is developing despite the distance that they have, which is separated due to incarceration. So providing places and creating a space where they can write their parent, where they can develop that relationship and know that the parents didn't leave them, right? They were separated because of a choice that they made. So giving a child the opportunity to be able to accept that and know that that's why they're separated. So another pillar is recreation and arts. And we provided this service just to give our young people a sense of normalcy. A lot of our young people are in impoverished environments, indignant environments, and we wanted to create a space where they can just be kids and have fun, right? So taking them to the Pistons game and bowling and the movies, anything that's fun, that also foster that social development piece as well too, so that they know how to interact with their peers and also just be in a space where they don't feel judged because everyone in this room is experiencing the same thing. Another pillar is our scholarship fund. One of our scholars, Donnell Johnson, he unfortunately passed away in 2018. He was hit by a driver that was speeding down a residential street. He was 14, heading to high school. So we wanted to honor his legacy by creating a scholarship fund to award all of our graduating seniors. And then lastly, we're creating a caregiver support group that really speaks to the parent that's here, that's left with all of the things that comes along with having a child experiencing parental incarceration. So wrapping our arms around them. But that is who we are. We did not talk about mentorship. Shout out to Shayla. Yeah, Shayla. But that is the last pillar. And that really just is that positive reinforcer, right? That person that's going to push that scholar to reach goals, to just do better and to be that extra push that young people need. 73% of children in general operates based off influence. And if we make sure that that person and that main influencer is positive, we already have a better chance at making sure that they're thriving as individuals. So that's Pure Heart.
If you're enjoying this episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, you can see more about the lives, struggles, hopes, and dreams of incarcerated women in One Girl Revolution's The Girl Inside on YouTube. The Girl Inside is a short documentary. It's only 10 minutes, so not a huge commitment, that features the stories and voices of 5 incarcerated women at Cook County Jail and an academic storytelling class that changed their lives. The link is in the show notes. Please watch and share The Girl Inside today. And now back to the show. We're, as I said when we started this podcast episode, we're sitting in the Pure Heart Foundation house. and you were just showing me around and gave me a tour. It's amazing what you're doing here. And you have a girls' room and a boys' room and like all the Game Boys in there. And then the girls' room, you're going to put manicure stations and do haircuts for all the kids. And even back to the mentorship, you showed me an area where the kids can kind of come together or bring their friends in if they have an idea to talk about things. And it's so powerful to think that there are adults around that can be mentors to them. If a kid comes to you with an idea of a project they want to start or a little business, or I know kids are so smart and they're coming up with all these creative ideas, especially in the times of TikTok and social media.
Yes.
And just to have good people around them and building community amongst these kids too. It's so powerful. Talk to me about the house.
Yeah. So this house, we got right before COVID happened, right? But this house was created to be a safe haven for our young people. A lot of our young people come from environments where they're just sleeping there, but they really don't feel at home. So getting a house was to give them that sense of security and teach and show them and be that model on how a household should be ran, right? So I can't wait to get the young people in here and we have dinner together and we just fellowship and they have that community of their peers and they feel like they're at home, you know? So the house was designed to give them that.
How do you get connected to the kids that come through here? I know you talk about them as being scholars. How do you get connected to the kids who end up becoming scholars? And how many kids have come through your program so far?
Absolutely. So since our inception, we have seen about 2,500 young people. And that's just connecting them to resources and being that immediate intervention and support to them. And about 80% of our scholars that has come through the program has been word of mouth. And that's just one family telling another family. At one point, we had an entire block of scholars. They all lived on the same block, literally. And we do have a partnership with Prison Fellowship, which is a national prison I guess it's more of a prison organization that supports the person that's in prison. So what the partnership that we were able to form with them is basically all of the inmates that have children, they send them through our portal. So at one point we had about 4,000 young people that we were able to connect with through Prison Fellowship. Now, we weren't able to house and service all 4,000 because that was an influx of young people, but that's just to speak about some of the partnerships that we've been able to connect with the families through. Yeah.
There are so many organizations around the country that are doing such incredible work, and I'm just grateful to be connected with you. And I know we've talked about some of them, and people are going to hear through this podcast about even more organizations, and it's just transforming the culture for these kids and changing this cycle of incarceration, which is so beautiful and so powerful. And so I'm just grateful for everything that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to read this here because I was reading through your website and it had some stats on it that I want people to know. But I want to read these stats because it's so important for people. We don't think about incarceration in the world, and people don't talk about it. People don't talk about it in the media. Overall, I mean, that's a massive generalization, but I want people to know. And so I was reading through your website and it says currently 2.7 million children in the U.S. have a parent who is incarcerated. Statistics show that children of incarcerated parents are 7 times more likely to enter the criminal justice system. And so I think it just goes to show the power that Pure Heart has to really transform these kids' lives and build up these families. And I want to know from you, what are some of the things that you've seen, even how it's built up families or it's changed family structure, you know, especially when you're building community between the parents and their kids?
Absolutely. So I don't know if you're familiar with an organization called One Day with God.
No.
So One Day with God it was founded by a woman named Scotty Barnes in North Carolina. And she started the organization because her father was incarcerated. But it's a 8-hour day camp where she is allowed to take volunteers, speakers, and an entire event inside of the prison.
Wow.
And children get to spend 8 hours with their mother or father, unattended, no glass between them, no telephone for them to communicate with. They can actually hug, dance, eat, and have an amazing time. And I brought that up because that's where I really saw the work really begin to transform families, young people being able to connect with their parent that's incarcerated. And the great thing about Pure Heart is we're that support. So after that initial contact and after you realize where your parents is, how do I make sure that we're supporting that family on developing that relationship, healing that relationship, and being that constant and consistent force that's really, really motivating families to come together. And I think that's what Pure Heart has done. I've seen so many families be reconnected and reunified through communication, through forgiveness, through healing, through resources. It's so many stories that I can speak on that where I've seen fathers write me letters saying, since my child has been a part of Pure Heart, we write now, we communicate now. My child wouldn't even want to converse with me, but since they've joined Pure Heart, it has literally changed our relationship. And I feel like a father again. I feel like a mother again. So it's just incredible.
It's broken down the walls. And I think that's so important. And that's something in our day-to-day lives. We all have walls that we build up. Mm-hmm. Kids build up walls to protect themselves. And so really Pure Heart is breaking down these walls and building community amongst all these kids and, having mentors, and then also building community amongst families too. It's incredible.
Yeah. And but it gives them a voice. Like so many of our young people have been silenced to the things that they are experiencing. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't pay attention to them enough for them to feel seen and for them to not feel misunderstood. And that's my number one goal with Pure Heart, is to make sure that they know that they matter, because so many people put emphasis on mass incarceration, but they're not really paying attention to the people that's affected by default, and that's the children, that's their families, that's the ones that go and they're swept under the rug. No one is really paying attention to the things that they experience because of it. So just making sure that they're heard, they're seen, and they're protected, and they know that they matter.
We have a tendency in the world today to really generalize things and, even and politicize things, especially when you look at the media. And it's so important for us to look at the human aspect, the human element. And that's why it's so important, to get your story out there, to get these kids' stories out there, and just to build that human element out in that world. I love stories, and I'd love to hear a couple of stories about scholars that have come through Pure Heart, and maybe some stories that have touched your heart in a special way.
Absolutely. My first story is going to be about one of our male scholars. He's one of my favorites. I won't disclose his name because I believe when he gets to a point and he wants to share his story, he will say his name. But when I first met him, he was about 12 to 13 years old, 12 turning 13. And when he came to the program, I could tell that he was experiencing a lot of depression and just really needed support and help. And Pure Heart was fairly new. And I remember telling him my story. And he's like, Miss Sherelle, we've been through the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, so if I can make it, you can too. And he's like, for sure. And he used to cut himself. And one day we were in my office and he came to me and he had bandages wrapped around his wrist. And he said, Miss Sherelle, I want to show you something. And I said, okay, you can show me what's wrong. So he took the bandages off and they were beginning to heal. And he said, since I've been coming with you, I don't cut myself anymore. Since I heard your story, I know I can make it out. Okay, I'm going to try not to cry. I always cry when I tell this story. But from that moment, I knew that this work was so critical and that it was necessary. And fast forward, his father was incarcerated during that time. And then A year later, his mother went to prison for 2 years. So at one point, both of his parents were incarcerated. And they're both home now, and he just graduated high school with honors. He started his own business. And I always tell his story because he was up against so much. And when Pure Heart first started, I literally was building out a program and he was doing homework. And that was it. I didn't have a program developed. We didn't have Pure Heart House. We didn't have the amazing field trips that we go on and the partnerships and everything. All I literally had to give him was time. And that really stuck with me because so many times we exist in this world thinking that we have to overcompensate and have things all well together before we help someone. And really, they don't care about any of that.
Right.
They just want to feel seen. They want to feel thought of and appreciated. And they just want your time. So that's one of the many of stories that we have. We have another story with a young lady with her father that was incarcerated, and she had 5 siblings. And I remember someone was interviewing us, and one thing that she said was, I never had the opportunity to be weak. I always had to have strength for my siblings. And when I came to Pure Heart, I remember it was just me and Miss Sherelle in a room, and I asked her if I could cry. And before she got it out, she started crying. So we both were crying. But in that moment, she was able to release everything that she was internalizing because she felt like she had to be strong for her siblings. And she graduated high school. She's working. She's in college. We have so many cycle breakers in this program. So many young people that has continually showed me that with support and resources, this cycle of incarceration can end. So
you must be such a proud mama.
I am.
You are the mama of all these kids. And it's like you see them going on, and then as they get older and they start having their own kids, and you see that cycle continues to be broken. I can only imagine how that's going to feel as you continue to grow with Pure Heart.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you about your book.
Okay.
Because everyone needs to read it. I have not read it yet, but I'm going to read it. And I was reading about it. The Prisoner's Kid, it's called. Can you talk a little bit about your book and why it's so important? Yeah.
So I wrote The Prisoner's Kid, My Journey to Freedom, for people to, know the stories and the dark thoughts that children with incarcerated parents feel, right? So I see my book as a love letter written to my parents. And in this book, I shared emotions and feelings that I never expressed to neither one of them. One, because I wasn't asked. And then 2, I just never had the courage to say how their incarceration made me feel. But ultimately, the book is really to encourage people to unlock themselves from their own imprisonment. Like, just because you hadn't had a parent incarcerated don't mean that at some point in your life you maybe wasn't prison to something. Maybe that's an addiction. Maybe it's pain. Maybe it's something that you haven't found strength to let go or release. And my book really encourages people to find strength and to free themselves from anything that may be holding them bondage. Sometimes we can't go and be our best selves until we release things that we're holding ourselves prison to. So that's one of the main goals of my book, is for people to read my story, internalize my story literally, because I go so in depth in detail with the things that I experience. You probably almost feel like you're experiencing it right there with me, because I want people to understand that you can be free. It's literally a choice. It's so attached to the mental. And if you just find strength in your journey and also recognize that there's so much purpose in your pain, sometimes literally my life is the example of that. I never would have imagined that God would take all of the things that I experienced and turn it into what it is now. If I look at the girl that was 6 and 7, not understanding why she was enduring all of that, I will look at her now and say it literally was for a reason. So
what do you hope that people, and maybe it's that, but what do you hope that people gain from your story?
That two things. One is, and this is on the softer side, that anything that you experience, it has a purpose, and you can decide what that purpose is. Literally, you can decide if you're going to allow that to rob you of your future, or you can decide that it won't rob you, and that you can still be the best and still deserve the best and live the best life that you were put on this earth to. And then the second thing is, experiencing bad things and trauma is not an excuse to repeat the cycle that you were born into. A lot of people sometimes use the things that they've experienced as a reason to justify their behavior. And it's not an excuse. Everyone goes through things. Everyone has a story. Everyone has experienced some type of circumstance that they did not deserve to experience. But it's not an excuse to misbehave or do things and feel like you don't have to pay the consequences, because everything is by your choice. I could have made a decision to go the opposite way, but I chose to go a different direction because I did not want the things that I experienced to cripple me or my life. I knew that I had so much more to offer than what I had gone through. So that's something, or two things that I would want people to know.
If you would like to hear more stories straight from women who have been incarcerated, check out One Girl Revolution's The Girl Inside on YouTube. One Girl Revolution took a film crew behind the walls of the largest single-site jail, Cook County Jail, and interviewed 5 incarcerated women. This short documentary highlights a life-changing academic class and the life and experiences of these 5 women, and what is revealed is the girl inside. You can watch The Girl Inside today on our website at onegirlrevolution.com. And now back to this episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast. Life is full of so many choices, and we have the choice every single day to do good or to do bad, to change our life or not. And it's really important for all of us to think about that on a daily basis, and also recognize that we can change it at any point. So if we're not happy, make the change. Or like how you did, even you had this dream and you were like, I need to get out of my job, and just jump fully into the next step. If people aren't happy where they are, we can always choose to change it.
Absolutely.
You've been through so much in your life, and your story is so inspiring to me. And I'm just, again, so grateful to have you on the podcast to share it and to talk about your incredible work. Is there a motto or maybe advice that you've gotten that really has stuck with you at some point throughout your life? Maybe like a mantra that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Two things. One was only what you do for Christ will last. And that was basically just saying, as long as you keep God first, you will always win the race. But you will lose when you begin to try to outrun God. Like he's the ultimate source of everything. So as long as you stay within the will that he has for your life, you'll be okay. And then 2, in order to truly be successful, you have to fall in love with sacrifice, because sacrifice is necessary in order to be successful. And that really has been one of the things that has literally changed my life, because I'm only 30 and I've been doing this since I was about 24, 25. So I'm at the peak of fun and living and, doing all the things that pleases me, or that instant gratification, right? But falling in love with sacrifice really made me realize that it's not what I can do today that brings that joy, but it's what I'll be able to do and the impact that I'll be able to leave for many years to come. And in order to do that, I have to sacrifice some things right now. So I will encourage people, especially if they're in the entrepreneur space or just have a desire to do anything, is know that the sacrifice is always required in order to get and gain the success and earn it. You have to make a couple sacrifices.
Dreaming is so important. And I know you're dreaming on a daily basis with all the scholars here, but I want to ask you to dream for a second and tell me 5 or 10 years down the line, what do you hope that Pure Heart Foundation looks like? What are some of the things that you hope are in your future? Or maybe even it's some things that you're working on now.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I can close my eyes, because that's what I'm doing right now, talking to Kate, dreaming 5 to 10 years of Pure Heart, I would say that Pure Heart has its own facility, a beautiful facility. It's a community center. It's a school. It's a safe haven. It's even transitional housing for young people that has nowhere to go, that's experiencing parental incarceration. It's a community of homes for parents that's coming home from incarceration, that's transitioning back into parenthood. And it's national. It's satellite places all over. It's a big community. And ultimately, we maintained and have maintained a 0% of our young people entering the criminal justice system.
Wow.
And that's to date. None of our young people have gone to juvenile, gone to prison, anything since they have been a part of Pure Heart. And that is my ultimate goal, is to make sure that that cycle breaks and continue to break.
I can't wait to see what the future holds, because I just feel like you're on the cusps of so many things, and I'm just so excited to follow everything that happens with Pure Heart and to promote it and support it in any way that one girl can. And I hope that everybody who's listening supports you and your work. What impact do you hope that Pure Heart can have on the world? I know that's a big question, but I know I see the impact that you're having, but what do you hope that it can have on the world?
I hope that Pure Heart impacts the world in a way that we don't even need to exist anymore. And that's simply because the cycle of incarceration has literally ended. And also, I would want the world to know that children of incarcerated parents, they matter. And the quicker that world recognizes that, I think the closer we are to that cycle of incarceration ending. Because if we really want to change the world, we have to create a space for the voiceless to have a voice. And my hope through Pure Heart is the impact that we have on the world is simply that their voices are heard and they're recognized and they no longer feel alone. And that parents are still given the opportunity to be a parent. And incarceration is defunded, in that we are creating spaces that's really healing people and giving them a fair chance to not recidivize, right? Or even to be in a space of confinement that strips away humanity. So I want Pure Heart to literally break the cycle layer by layer by starting with their children.
You're doing it. You're doing it one step at a time. And I know that you're going to have a big impact. And it's important for people to be thinking about, you know, what can we be doing in our own communities to support those who are incarcerated or those who are getting out, to support their children. And you're just such an example of that.
Thank you so much.
I want to ask you about just your day-to-day life, because I was thinking as you were talking about, you know, your work with Pure Heart. What is the best thing about the work that you do, and what's the most difficult thing?
The best thing about the work that I do, I don't even see it as work, but the best thing that I get to do through Pure Heart is connecting with the families and having those pivotal moments where I'm thinking I'm doing everything wrong, and a scholar reminds me that I'm doing everything right, you know, and that's just them appreciating the work that Shayla and I do through Pure Heart. I think the hardest part about Pure Heart for me, honestly, is not being able to solve everything that they're going through. Like Pure Heart, we can't do everything. We can play a huge role in our scholars' lives, but it's some things that I wish that I could change immediately for them, and I can't. And that breaks my heart. It breaks my heart knowing that when they're with us, their smiles are pure, they're happy, they feel safe, they feel secure. And when they get off the bus to go home from the field trip, or when they have to leave the house, I don't know how life for them looks. I don't know if they'll eat again. I don't know if they'll smile again. And that breaks my heart. So yeah, I'm going to cry now. I'm sorry. But yeah, that's the hardest part, is just not being able to change their lives. If it was up to me, we have a big old house and they'll all be here, and I'll make sure, they're all cared for and well taken care of. But yeah.
So if anybody who's listening, if they want to just donate a giant house, and
please do
adopt
right?
all the kids, bring all the families in,
because they go through so much.
Yeah.
They go through so much. Kate, they go through so much.
But it's the important things are the little things that we do. And like you said earlier in the podcast episode, I think sometimes we talk ourselves out of doing something because we don't have the money, or we don't have the resources, or we don't feel like we have the time, or we don't feel like we're worthy of whatever's been put on our heart. And you're such an example of, we're not going to be able to solve everything right now. We're hoping to work towards that, but all I know is what I can do right now. And this is what the resources that I have. These are the kids that I'm connected to, and that can have a massive impact. And we need to start shifting all of our mindsets. And I'm saying that really for myself and for everybody who's listening, that we need to find opportunities, and we might not be able to solve all of the issues at hand, but we might be able to make a difference in one kid's life, and that could change the trajectory of so many other lives following it.
Yeah, for sure.
If you could get to the root, and I have some ideas about it because you shared your story and you've shared some of the driving forces behind what you do, but if you could get to the very root of why you do what you do on a daily basis, the fire that is lit behind you, what would you say that root is?
I think that root is the feeling that I felt when I was a child and when my parents were incarcerated, more so my mother. The feeling of loneliness, the feeling of not being able to relate to anyone else around me, the feeling of not being misunderstood is something that I still can't even articulate, because that's how bad it hurt. And I just don't want any other child to experience that, to feel like that. And that's why I really fight for Pure Heart and fight for our scholars, because that feeling is just not fair. And no child deserves to feel like that. And people always ask me, did it hurt more when your father passed or when your mom was incarcerated? And it hurt more with my mom being incarcerated, because I know my dad is gone and I know he's not coming back. But as a child, psychologically, I can't understand why my mom is physically alive, but I can't see her. I can't be near her, right? And have, or just feel her presence. So the root is making sure that these young people don't feel that way. And if they do, correct that with making sure that they feel loved, seen, and they can have that community of young people that understand them too.
For people that are listening that want to support your work, I know there are a variety of different ways that people can support your work. How can they support you? And then secondarily, what can people do in their own communities? Because we have people that listen all over the country, no matter where they are. What are things that they can do in their own communities?
Absolutely. So if you visit our website, which is pureheartfoundation.org, we have a lovely section that's called Take Action, where you can donate, right? We are always accepting donations. Even though we have a big mission, we operate off a small budget, surprisingly, right? But we are always accepting donations and contributions to further our work and to make sure that we have the resources in place to provide our best service to our young people and families. Secondly, you can volunteer. We're always looking for volunteers in any capacity, whether it be skill volunteer or, hey, I just want to volunteer and help clean up. Anything that you want to do to serve our young people and families, we appreciate greatly. And also another way you can get involved with Pure Heart is spreading awareness. We have a lot of statistics on our website, on our social media accounts, just educating people on statistics around parental incarceration. A lot of people don't recognize that this is a huge issue in this country, but if you're not directly impacted by it, you really don't know it exists. So becoming more aware. And then something that you can do in your community, even if it's not attached to an organization like Pure Heart, you can start by just simply listening to a child and not judging them based on their race, based on the community that they live in, based on the clothes that they wear, the music that they're listening to, the group of people that they may be walking down the street with. Literally in Detroit right now, 4 out of 10 children has had a parent in prison. So you walk past 10 children and 4 of them has had a parent in prison. And that might be the 4 that's looking angry, smiling, looking sad. You just don't know. So I encourage people to simply just look at kids, not as targets, not as statistics, not as another kid that can keep the cycle going, right? Just simply a child. Open up your mouth and have a conversation with them because they'll blow your mind. Like that's just the start of you making a difference or an impact in a young person's life.
Yeah, just seeing people. That's one thing that I'm constantly reminding myself of. And even today, before I came over here, I saw an Instagram video of this guy. He's a well-known speaker and does all this a variety of different work. He has an organization, and he saw this piano player in a restaurant when he was in the airport and sat down and talked to the guy, found out that he was really struggling, and ended up doing this whole like GoFundMe campaign while he was sitting in the restaurant. Just did like, hey, I'm just putting up my Cash App and anybody can donate. And that touched my heart so much, just thinking about that, exactly what you're talking about. Seeing people, seeing the kids and just saying hello to them. And we all know that feeling, especially coming out of the crazy year that 2020 was, just being able to see people's smiles in their faces and saying hello to somebody. You never know what you might find out or how they might impact your own life.
Absolutely.
Before I let you go, I always end this podcast on one question, and I want to ask you, if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
So many things, but if I had to narrow it down to one, is to never lose your voice and always speak up, no matter who tries to silence you. Speak up. Women oftentimes they fall to the back, right? And their voice is silenced. They experience things and they're afraid to speak out and speak up. So I would encourage all the women, little girls, the mothers, the daughters, the sisters, the aunts, listening to this podcast, to never lose your voice. Never allow anyone to silence you. Silence is deadly. It can affect everything, literally. If you're silent, you're internalizing everything. And if you internalize everything inside of you is deteriorating. So open up your mouth, say how you feel, say no, say yes when you want to, and use your voice, because someone hearing your story or you simply opening up your mouth can save the life of another girl or another woman.
And you're the embodiment of that, Sherelle. Like, you sharing your story, I know, has encouraged and empowered so many other people to share their voice and see the power that they have. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on the podcast. And just thank you for all the great work that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number One Girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com.